In the previous video, we used estimation to solve questions from the digital SAT practice test. It's still important to know how to find the exact answers. Join me in this video where I'll go through the same questions, but this time I'll find the exact solutions to each question. Hi, I'm Zainab, aka the STEM Coach. I help students achieve their academic dreams, and on this channel, I share those strategies to help you as well. So make sure to click like, share, and subscribe. This question involves the formula for speed. Speed is distance per time, but before we solve that, let's quickly check the units. The speed is given as centimeters per second, and the distance that's given is also in centimeters, and the time that we're asked to compute we're asked to find it in seconds. So we're good with the units. Now, so let's just plug and chug. So we'll have 12 equals 108 the distance over time. We could use cross multiplication here and write 12 as 12 over 1, and now cross multiply to get 12 times t equals 108 times 1, which is 108. And then we can divide both sides by 12 to solve for t. And t would be 108 over 12, which is 9, choice A. Now, if you're a student in the US, you may have learned the formula as DIRT, distance equals rate times time. And it's the same formula written differently. So for that way of solving it, we would say instead of d, we'll have 108 equals rate, which is our speed, 12 times t. And in order to solve for t now, we're going to divide both sides by 12. And we'll get 108 over 12 again equals t, time, which would be 9, choice A. This question involves percentages. Now, percentages show up a lot on the SAT, so it would be best if you memorized how to calculate them. For us here, part is 828,000, and the whole is the total number of beads that we have, which was given as 900,000. Our percentage is unknown, and we divide by 100. We could solve this by cross multiplication, which would give us 828,000 times 100 equals 900,000 times x. And now in order to solve for the unknown, we can divide both sides by 900,000, which if you calculate would give you that x equals 92%, choice D. This question also involves ratio and proportions, and we're given the length and width of a rectangle and we're asked to preserve the ratio. So initially, we're told that the length of this rectangle was 35 and the width was 10. Now, the width has increased by 7, which means it would become 17, and we're asked about the length. So let's find the new length. That we can solve by cross multiplication now that we've set up this ratio. 35 times 17 would equal 10 times x. In order to solve for x, we would divide both sides by 10. And we can compute this in a calculator, which would give us 59.5 equals x. Now, the question didn't ask us what's the new length. It's asking by how much do we have to change the length in order to preserve this ratio. So they're asking for the difference between these two lengths. So the answer would be 59.5 minus 35, which would give us 24.5, which is choice B. This question involves an isosceles right triangle, or the 45-45-90 triangle. Hopefully you'll have the proportions of this triangle memorized, but in case you forgot, you can look at the formula sheet on the test, which you'll see is given that the hypotenuse is s root 2, and that each side is s. We're asked to find the perimeter of this triangle given the hypotenuse. Hypotenuse is 58, which means s times square root 2 equals 58. Now, in order to find s, we can divide both sides by square root 2, and we get s to be 58 over square root 2. We're told to find the perimeter. So the perimeter would be all sides added. So the hypotenuse, which was 58, plus one of the sides, 58 over root 2, plus the last side, 58 over root 2. Now, if you look, none of the answer choices look exactly like the perimeter that we found. You have two options. You can find what value the perimeter that you found equals to by using your calculator, and then you can go through the answer choices and see which one also gives the same number. In my opinion, that will take too much precious time, and I would suggest that you instead work this out to figure out which expression does it equal to. Let's work on that together. So we had 58 plus 58 over root 2 plus 58 over root 2. Now, the last two are fractions with the same denominator, so we can combine them and simply add the numerators. Again, we can do that because the denominators are the same. 58 plus 58 is 116, so we'll have 58 plus 116 over square root 2. Now, we want to rationalize the second fraction. None of the answer choices had a square root 2 in the denominator. So another way of writing 116 over square root 2 would be to multiply the top and bottom of this fraction by square root 2. Now, what does that make our fraction equal to? Well, we'll have 116 square root 2 over square root 2 times square root 2. Square root 2 times square root 2 is 2. So we'll have 116 over 2 times square root 2, which would lead us to 58 square root 2. We'll bring that 58 down here. So our perimeter would equal to 58 plus 58 square root 2, which is choice C that was given. This question involves ratios and preserving a proportion as well. We're given the results of a smaller sample poll, and we're asked to extrapolate it onto a bigger population. The poll is between Angel and Terry. There's different ways of solving this, but the most straightforward way is to first find out how many votes is Angel expected to win and how many votes is Terry expected to win. So let's start by solving for Angel's votes. So Angel wins 483 votes out of 803 voters. Now, we're told that the bigger population has 6,424. So we'll set up the proportion, and you guessed it, we'll use cross multiplication to solve for x. So if we calculate this, we can divide both sides by 803, and you will get that Angel wins 3,864 votes. Now, this is choice C, but they were not asking us how many votes Angel would win. This is a trap choice from our beloved test makers. We need to find out also how many votes would Terry win. So for that, Terry, we could do this two ways. We could set up a new proportion, or we could subtract 364 from 6,424. And we can calculate that as 2,560. Now the question is asking by how much Angel would win, so they want us to find the difference between these two numbers. So our final answer would be 3864 minus 2560, which is choice B. This question involves a linear model. We're told that our x is increased by 2.1, and we're asked how that would affect the y, our output, or f in this situation. Now, these questions show up a lot on the SAT, and there are different ways of solving it. But since we're going to be using our calculator in this video, we might as well go ahead and use plug and chug. What I mean by that is that let's pick a value for x. I would pick a number that's greater than 273.15. Let's say 300. If x is 300, we would compute what the corresponding y would be for that value. And if you use your calculator, that would be 80.33. Now we're told that x is increased by 210, so our x would be 302.1 now. And we're going to find the corresponding Fahrenheit of 302.1, which would be 84.11. The question is asking about the increase from 80.33 to 84.11. So if we subtract these two values, we'll get 3.78, choice A. Why don't you try this question with another value and see whether you get the same answer? This question involves unit conversion. Unit conversion shows up in a lot of subjects, so it's important to learn it beyond preparing for a standardized test. So we're given that the area of a park is 11,863,808 square yards. So that's yards to the power 2. And we want to convert it to square miles. Since we have yards in the numerator, you want to multiply it by a conversion factor such that you have yards in your denominator because we want to get rid of it, and miles in the numerator because that's what we're converting to. Now, if we look at the conversion factor that's given, we're told that 1 mile is equivalent to 1760 yards. So we'll put the numbers next to their corresponding units. Now let's look at the units. We have yards squared in the numerator and 1 yard in the denominator. So these cancel out, but we'll still have a yard in the numerator. So we need to go through this unit conversion one more time, because we know we don't want to have any yards anymore. So we'll multiply this by another conversion factor where we still have yards in the denominator and miles in the numerator. And we'll put their corresponding numbers next to them, so 1 mile and 1760 yards. At this point, the last yard, the denominator, will cancel out the other yard in the numerator. So we're going to be left only with miles times miles, which is miles squared, which is what we wanted. So now we can use our calculator and find what's 8 divided by 1760. And that would be actually 6,740.8, which was given as choice D by our lovely test makers, which was a trap choice, because we have to also divide it one more time by that other 1760. So if we do that, we'll actually get 3.83, which is choice B. Here we have another question about conversions, but this time we're going between radians and degrees. It would be great if you could remember that pi radians is 180 degrees. So let's convert the two numbers that are given to degrees. R, which is 2 pi over 3 radians, is the same as 2 times 180 over 3 degrees, which would be 120 degrees. Now the other number that's given is 5 pi over 12, which if we replace the pi by 180, we'll get that to be 75 degrees. And we're asked to find angle T, which we're told is basically 75 degrees more than 120. So we'll add these two numbers up, and T will be 195 degrees. Now, here we were lucky that the radians were given in pi's. That will not always be the case. So let's see how we could have solved this with setting up a proportion. It would be best if you knew pi radians is 180 degrees. Now, let's say under the stress of the test you forgot. You can quickly look up the formula sheet and you will see that we're given that 2 pi radians is 360 degrees. So let's use that and proportions to solve this question. So if we have 2 pi radians is 360 degrees, now we want to find what is 2 pi thirds radians. So we'll leave 2 pi thirds on top because on top we're putting radians. And then we need to find the corresponding degrees, which I would replace by x. And again, we'll use cross multiplication and we'll solve x to be as 2 pi times x equals 2 pi thirds times 360. And at this point, we can divide both sides by 2 pi. And we will get x to be 360 over 3, which is 120. We'll do the same thing for the other measurement. So we have radians to degrees as 2 pi to 360 equals, this time, the value of the radians is 5 pi over 12. And the degrees will replace by x. And we'll do cross multiplication one more time. So we'll have 2 pi x equals 5 pi 12ths times 360. Divide both sides by 2 pi. And using our calculator, we'll get that x equals 75. So we had that r is 120. And that t is 75 degrees more than 120. So our answer would be 195, choice C. Here's another question involving percentages. As I said, percentages are very popular with SAT test makers. We're asked what percentage of 300 is 75. So the part is given as 75 and our whole is 300. The percent is the unknown, and we'll divide by 100 per the formula. Here we can use cross multiplication to solve for the unknown. So we have 75 times 100 equals 300 times p. We can divide both sides by 300, and we'll get that p is 75 over 3, which is 25. So our answer would be choice A. This is one of the harder questions on the practice test. We're given the frequency plots of 2 data sets, and we're asked how can we get the smallest difference between the means of these 2 data sets. But since it's on a standardized test, we'll see that we can find a pattern between these 2 sets. Let's look at the first bar for data set A. The height of this bar is 3. That means it has 3 values. And the minimum of these values can be either 20, 20, and 20, or they could be 29, 29, and 29. Now for data set B, for the first bar, we could either have on one extreme 10, 10, and 10, and on the maximum extreme 19, 19, and 19. Now we're told to minimize the difference. So that would happen when data set A is all 20s and data set B is all 19. And we're going to use this logic to find the mean of each of these data sets for the extremes that we just realized and find the difference between them. So for data set A, we're going to take the minimum possible value for each bar and find the mean. So for the first bar, we have 20 times 3. And then for the second bar, we'll have 30. And because the height is 4, we'll have 4 data points. For the other bar, we have the minimum would be 40 times the height 7. And lastly, for the last bar, it will be 50. And we have 9 data points. And since there's a total of 23, and we're looking at the average, we divide by 23, and we get the value to be about 39.56. Now we'll do the same for dataset B. For dataset B, we're taking the maximum possible values for each bar. So for example, for bar 1, we said that the maximum would be 19. So let's find the mean for dataset B. It'll be 19 times 3. The second bar has a height of 4, and the maximum that it can be would be 29. So we'll have 29 times 4. So on and so forth. So we'll have 39 times 7 plus 49 times 9. And since we have 23 values, we'll divide this by 23. And we get this to be 38.56. Now, the question is asking about the difference between these two. So we'll take 39.56 and from it subtract 38.56, which will give us 1, which will be choice B. This question involves computing a rate. We're given the initial and final values of a propellant, and we're asked to find the rate at which it was used. So the first thing that we want to do is first find the difference between the two values to see how much propellant was used. So we'll use our calculator quickly to find the difference, which would give us 104,895, which of course was given as choice D as one of the trap choices by our beloved test makers. The question is not asking how much propellant was used, but the rate at which it was used. So we need to divide it by the time that's given. So if we take the number, divide it by 21, we'll get choice A. Now, I want to bring your attention to this point in that if you had used your calculator and put in 47,000 minus 362,105 divided by 21, you would have gotten a wrong answer. That's because of orders of operation. Try it out and see what you get. And then the next time, put your numerator in parentheses so that it first finds the difference, then it divides by 21. The second way will get you to the correct answer. We're asked about density, which is defined as mass per volume. Now, if you didn't know that formula and you wanted to see how to answer this question via estimation, check out my other video linked in the description below where I show you how you can use reverse engineering to go from the units to the solution that we need. But for now, let's use the formula. Since the density is mass per volume, we need to first find the volume of the solid. It's a cube, so the volume would be side to the power 3. And each side is 0.9. We can use our calculator here, and 0.9 to the power 3 is 0.729. And density is given as 807, so let's plug that into the formula. Mass is unknown, but volume is 0.729. Of course, we're going to use cross multiplication, which we've used a lot in this video, to find mass to be as 807 times 0.729, which would give us choice A, 588. If you'd like to see how to use estimation to solve the same questions, check out this other video. And until next time, click like and subscribe.